10-9 over. This was reportedly the most common message passed over the analogue radio system of Staffordshire Police in the early 1990s. It's police code for repeat last transmission. The radio systems used for well over a decade were beginning to crack under the ever-increasing workload, while engineers were finding it more and more difficult to find parts to repair the kit. Existing equipment was being cannibalized for parts, and it made policing hard work, and force chiefs were calling for a replacement. Not only that, around 60 radio scanners were confiscated during 1994 and 1995 in Staffordshire alone. Officers were turning up to jobs only to find that criminals had long since fled due to being able to track their every move. Force chiefs visited Miami, Florida and Phoenix, Arizona in the early 1990s to see a relatively new radio technology in action called Smart Zone, a trunked radio network that was revolutionizing US policing. Armed with a strong case for the Home Office, they travelled back to the UK and put forward a request for StarNet, a quote scrambled radio system that wasn't really scrambled at all. Met Radio, also known as METPOL, was also being procured for the Metropolitan Police, a mammoth system which you can find my detailed video about in the description below. And even though plans existed for a national project which would later become Airwave, these two forces successfully argued that their operational needs were so pressing that they could not afford to wait. The cost of these local systems was approximately 1/3 of the Airwave system, allegedly. However, they still used analog technology and didn't provide the enhanced functionality of Airwave, such as encryption or data transfer. They also didn't have the facility for national roaming, and so would not meet all of the criteria laid out in the major review for Airwave that was taking place at the time. The name StarNet is interesting for two reasons. It was originally given the name because it was going to involve the police, fire and ambulance services, a road company and another unknown user, totaling 5 users in all, or 5 points of a star. However, these other users dropped out of the scheme, leaving just Staffordshire Fire and Police. The name StarNet then became just an acronym for Staffordshire Radio Network. It was launched in the first week of January 1999, although I believe a trial may have taken place in Lichfield in March 1998, and was jointly procured and used by Staffordshire's Police and Fire and Rescue Services. It was the country's first joint police and fire radio network that used a quote intelligent computer designed to improve emergency service response times and the quality and efficiency of the service by allowing radio communications over dynamic talk groups. The £6 million system was designed to allow firefighters and police officers to pass messages through interchangeable channels and respond to emergency calls more quickly. This is known as trunking. StarNet centrally managed a pool of channels, intelligently switching users to available channels to enable efficient communication amongst a large number of users without interference. It initially linked 300 police officers, 600 special officers and 900 firefighters, and was switched on by Staffordshire's Chief Constable John Gifford and the county's Fire Chief Peter Dale. In addition to dynamic frequency changing, StarNet provided status updating, initially used by Staffordshire Fire and Rescue Service and later Staffordshire Police. This allowed, through push-button control, automatic computerized updates, which were immediately displayed on the screens of control room staff. This was a major benefit, particularly during busy periods, because it freed up valuable airtime while also ensuring instant and accurate records of movements and locations of police and fire personnel. StarNet also enabled, for the first time anywhere in Britain, police officers to contact each other at police stations, in vehicles and on the street. They could also communicate directly to Staffordshire Fire and Rescue Service, which was something that had never been done before. Because of StarNet's unique trunked frequency characteristics, it was available on demand, and this made the whole system more efficient, solving any problems of busy and quiet periods among stations. In simple terms, officers who couldn't get through were connected to an automatic queuing system, which called them back when a line became available. It enabled desk-bound officers to communicate with officers on the street via their desk phones. It also allowed the two forces to communicate with other services such as the prison service and town centre CCTV control rooms in Leek, Hanley, Burton, Tamworth, Lichfield, Cannock and Stafford. When it was rolled out, it covered 2,716 square kilometres or 1,048 square miles and handled 50,000 messages per day. StarNet was many years in the making. The idea was floated in 1994 with a view to going live in mid-1995. This was optimistic, however. The decision was made to go ahead with StarNet in 1995 with a predicted launch date of 1997. Again, this was optimistic. Between the initial idea in 1994 and rollout in 1999, the cost of StarNet grew from £3 million to £6 million and had a final running cost of £1.2 million per year. Portable radios consisted mainly of Motorola MTS 2000s, both with keypads and without, and mobile radios were mostly Motorola MCS 2000s. Certain mobile units were placed in cases to form deployable systems. Altogether, I believe there were 21 transmitter sites that consisted of a mix of transmit and receive, receive only, and microwave only sites. I have heard 24 as a figure too. StarNet had multiple remote receivers and in-building amplifiers to provide good indoor talking coverage into the system for portables. Information on the transmitters and their frequencies is sparse nowadays. On an interesting side note, I also believe that RAF Lakenheath in Suffolk, operated by the United States Air Force in Europe, used a StarNet radio system for their communications around the same time too, but I can't confirm this. StarNet was divided into two zones, north and south. There were a number of cells I've managed to identify, but I can't be certain how many there were in total. I managed to confirm some frequency information for cells 5, 6, 7, 11, 12 and 18. Most cells had 4 frequencies as alternative control channels and traffic channels in high traffic times, together with between 2 and 6 dedicated traffic channels. Many different talk groups were used within StarNet. Just exactly how many there were isn't clear. If anyone has any more frequency, cell or talk group information, then please drop me an email. Because StarNet was a trunk system which switched frequencies between overs, it was more secure from people who listened into police communications, or so they thought. It didn't stop people, however. Scanners capable of tracking trunk networks could easily be programmed to monitor StarNet, and this was going on within weeks of its launch. StarNet originally employed what were known as scanner traps. These came in the form of continuous recorded messages, scanner trap 1, scanner trap 1, scanner trap 1, etc. The idea being that when an eavesdropper was trying to scan StarNet with a radio scanner, not only would you have to contend with different users, but also scanner traps, which cause the scanner to be, well, trapped on that broadcast. When I say different users, you have to remember that when a user released the PTT button, another division or fire brigade could start transmitting on that frequency because users were moved around constantly. The use of scanner traps with trunking was extremely clever and made monitoring this system extremely difficult. Later on, the recorded messages disappeared and were replaced with what sounded like the hash of an encrypted message. Monitoring StarNet was extremely difficult with a conventional scanner, and trunk tracking scanners struggled in the early days too. StarNet used VHF 12.5 kHz steps, and the available trunk trackers at that time could only resolve 5 kHz steps on VHF. However, with the introduction of the Bearcat 780, this changed, and monitoring StarNet became possible and relatively easy. Staffordshire Police and Fire were one of the last forces to make the switch to Tetra Airwave when they did in 2006. There was a slight crossover by all accounts, and StarNet saw limited use throughout 2006 before being switched off altogether. Most of the equipment that you've seen in pictures so far was destroyed internally, but some ended up in the hands of hobbyists and collectors. If you have any more detailed frequency, cell or zone information for StarNet, or any pictures of the infrastructure at transmitter sites, then please get in touch.